In a twist no one saw coming, Queen Camilla has been stripped of her royal title, just as King Charles hands over the throne to Prince William. Inside Buckingham Palace, power shifted silently but dramatically. Camilla, once crowned and commanding, now steps into the background with nothing but a ceremonial label. Charles didn't just step down, he rewrote royal history. And as William takes the crown, a new chapter begins, with love, unity, and one very unexpected goodbye. What led to this quiet royal shakeup? Why now? And what really happened behind those palace doors? This is the royal reset. The crown changes hands. It happened behind the palace doors, quietly, yet history-shaking. Inside the throne room, King Charles made a decision that would change the monarchy forever. With a slow, deliberate motion, he passed the crown to Prince William, not because of tradition or pressure, but because of urgency. There was no grand announcement, no long speeches, just a heavy silence and a moment no one saw coming. Camilla stood off to the side, watching, without a crown, without authority. Her role was clear: observer, not queen. Senior aides were left stunned as Charles broke from formality and embraced William. That one hug said it all. One king was stepping back, and the future was stepping forward. This wasn't just a ceremonial shift. It was a surrender of power, a deliberate choice made by a king who knew his time was up. Charles didn't falter. His hands didn't shake. But his eyes said everything. This was a farewell. William didn't reach for the crown. He walked toward it slowly, not with eagerness, but with duty. The moment felt heavy, but right. And when he looked at his father, not the crown, you could feel the shift. Respect, responsibility, readiness. The monarchy didn't just pass from one man to another, it evolved. With Camilla in the shadows and Catherine standing strong beside her husband, a new royal chapter had quietly begun. Camilla's title stripped. Just hours after the crown changed hands, Buckingham Palace issued a quiet but shocking statement. Effective immediately, Camilla would no longer serve as queen, not in title, not in duty. Her new role? Queen Consort Emerita. A ceremonial name. No power, no influence, and most importantly, no crown. It wasn't loud, it wasn't messy, but it was final. During the ceremony, Camilla wore no royal regalia, and afterward, her name was missing from all official releases. Her staff were informed. Her duties were cancelled. Her public calendar was cleared. It was a royal reset, executed with silence, not scandal. Inside the palace, there were no tears, just a quiet acceptance. The woman who had once fought to be recognized was now being written out of the story, gracefully, deliberately, completely. Her crown was removed, not in front of the cameras, but in the privacy of her chamber. A symbol taken away without a word. It was clear. This was no longer her era. Charles's final royal act. Before the official handover, King Charles had one last conversation, and it was with Camilla. Privately, he said the words no one expected to hear. It's time. He didn't give orders. He didn't apologize. But he made it clear. He was stepping down, not just for himself, but for the future. Insiders say Camilla simply nodded, tearful, calm. And then she whispered back, "I understand." There had been whispers for months about Charles's health, his growing exhaustion, his desire to give William space to lead. But in that final moment, it wasn't about strategy. It was about peace. Charles didn't want chaos. He wanted clarity. His last move as king wasn't ceremonial. It was deeply personal. He had nothing to prove, no throne to protect. He just wanted the monarchy to survive and for his son to thrive. That single decision, made in private, felt around the world, wasn't just a royal act. It was a father's sacrifice. And with that, Charles walked into history, not defeated, but done. William takes the throne. As the crown sat waiting, all eyes turned to Prince William. But he didn't rush toward it. He didn't smile. He took a breath, glanced at his father, and walked with a weight that only he could feel. This wasn't just a prince stepping into his destiny. It was a man stepping into history. The room stayed silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. William approached the throne not like a man claiming power, but like a son honoring a legacy. His first glance wasn't at the crown. It was at King Charles, the man who had just let go of everything. Then, with steady hands, William accepted the crown. Not with celebration, but with stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when you know everything is about to change. There was no fanfare, no dramatic music, just the quiet understanding that the future had arrived. From the corner, Catherine stood tall, eyes locked on her husband. She didn't need a title to be powerful in that moment. She already was. Together, they looked like the beginning of something new. For years, William had waited, prepared, carried the burden, and now, finally, he had taken the throne. But not for glory, for duty. And somewhere behind the scenes, Camilla watched it all, her place in the royal picture already fading. Camilla's final bow. While William took his first steps as king, Camilla took her last as queen. She didn't make a scene. She didn't speak to the press. She simply gave a small curtsy, her eyes glassy with emotion. No title, no crown, no more official place in the royal lineup. And yet, the gesture was filled with meaning. There were no photographers chasing her, no royal aides guiding her path. She walked out of the public spotlight the same way she entered it, controversially, quietly, and with determination. But this time, there was no fight left, no role to defend. Her time was over. Those inside the palace said Camilla left the ceremony with grace. She didn't linger. She didn't look back. She simply exited. And with that, so did her reign. Not a single palace statement referred to her as queen again after that day. Only one term remained, Queen Consort Emerita. Elegant, polite, but empty. Camilla had once been one of the most talked about women in Britain. Now, she was being edited out of the narrative, her presence reduced to memories, her influence quietly dissolved. But before she disappeared behind the palace walls, one moment changed everything. The private conversation no one saw. After the formal ceremony ended and the cameras moved away, William did something no one expected. He found Camilla. No protocol, no audience, just a quiet hallway where two very different royal paths crossed for one final time. Insiders said William approached her with calm and kindness. He didn't come to confront. He came to acknowledge. What they said to each other wasn't recorded. But someone who witnessed it from a distance described it in one word: healing. William reportedly gave her a small embrace, not royal, but human. Camilla, with her voice low, replied with words that left some stunned. Take care of them. She wasn't talking about herself. She meant Charles, the family, the institution. It was a strange emotional moment between two people who had rarely shown public warmth. But in that hallway, there was no past, no titles, no media. Just two people bound by history. And when they turned to walk away, they didn't speak again. It was a final moment, a final bow, a quiet end to a long, complicated chapter. Public reaction, shock and sympathy. The moment Buckingham Palace confirmed Camilla's title had been removed, the internet erupted. Social media exploded in real time. Within minutes, hashtags like #Camilla stripped and New King William were trending across the world. Some called it justice. Others said it felt strangely sad, but one thing was certain: nobody could ignore it. Comment sections filled up with years of emotion. People brought up the past, the drama, the pain. And for many royal watchers, it felt like the final chapter of a story that began decades ago. She was never meant to be queen, one post read. Graceful exit, no scandal, just closure, said another. For some, it was vindication. For others, a surprising wave of empathy hit. No matter what side people stood on, they all agreed on one thing. This moment had changed the monarchy forever. TV networks cut into regular programming. Royal commentators were caught off guard, scrambling to explain what had just happened. Even international outlets picked it up. In one evening, the narrative shifted, and with it, public perception. While William and Catherine were celebrated for their quiet strength, Camilla became the symbol of a royal transition no one saw coming this soon. And in the background, Charles's silent step down only fueled the emotional response. But while the world watched, one woman was already slipping into the shadows. Camilla alone, her quiet farewell. That night, Camilla returned to her private quarters. No entourage, no aides, no photographers, just silence. She reportedly whispered to Charles, "It was an honor, even when it was hard." The crown jewels that once sat on her dressing table, necklaces, brooches, the tiara she wore with pride, were packed away. They were no longer hers. Not officially, not emotionally, and definitely not symbolically. Staff said she didn't cry. She didn't demand anything. She simply closed the door, sat down, and accepted that her time in the spotlight had ended. No scandal, no disgrace. Just a quiet farewell from a woman who had spent decades climbing into the public's. Reluctant acceptance, only to leave it with barely a word. Inside the palace, her private team was already being dissolved, schedules erased, duties cancelled, invitations redirected. It was a royal vanishing act, not forced, but finalized. And as she took off her jewels for the last time, Camilla seemed to understand something deeper than titles or power. Her reign was over, not in flames, but in stillness. And in the days that followed, the man who brought her into that world took his own step into the shadows. Charles steps into the shadows. After years on the throne, King Charles stepped back without a single protest, without a fight, and without fanfare. There was no televised goodbye, no farewell banquet, no final parade down the mall. Instead, the transition was sealed with a simple conversation behind closed doors, quiet, respectful, and final. His new title said everything. Advisor Emeritus, not king, not regent, just a man stepping aside with dignity while remaining close enough to guide if asked. From this point on, Charles would no longer attend major state functions unless personally invited by King William. His voice, once a key player in global discussions on climate, architecture, and reform, would now fall silent in official settings. The royal seal that had been affixed to state documents for decades would be retired from daily use, tucked away in history. It wasn't the end of a reign, it was the end of a presence. Those close to him say the decision wasn't rushed, and it wasn't just about age or health. It was about timing, precision, awareness. He had watched William grow, not just as a prince, but as a father, husband, and leader. And in the quiet of his own heart, Charles knew the future was ready. He understood the risk of overstaying. He understood the burden of legacy. He didn't want to be remembered as the monarch who lingered too long, casting a shadow over a son born to lead. He wanted to be remembered as the man who knew when to let go. And that's exactly what he did. No resistance, no drama, just a graceful surrender. In doing so, Charles quietly rewrote the rules of royal transition. This wasn't a palace coup, it wasn't forced abdication, it wasn't scandal. It was a planned, measured shift, rooted in wisdom, shaped by love, for the crown, for the people, and yes, even for Camilla, who had stood beside him through decades of scrutiny and sacrifice. His reign may not have been long by historic standards, but it was significant. He had pushed for modernization, gently nudged the monarchy into new conversations, and helped heal the cracks left by the past. He had been the bridge between tradition and the future. And now that bridge had done its job. As Charles stepped away from the throne, with no crown, no curtain call, just quiet acceptance, a new light rose in his place, a light named William. And with that final step, Charles didn't lose his legacy. He secured it. Catherine's rising presence. In the middle of all the change, Catherine, Princess of Wales, became the monarchy's emotional center. She didn't give a speech. She didn't post online. But her actions said more than any words ever could. At the state dinner that followed the handover, cameras caught a quiet moment. Catherine gently guided Camilla to her seat, offering her a soft look and a small, respectful smile. It wasn't political. It was personal. That gesture echoed across the world. People saw more than a princess. They saw a future queen who leads with empathy, not ego. In a royal family long criticized for coldness, Catherine had become the warm, steady force keeping it human. She didn't fight for power. She didn't push anyone out. But slowly, surely, her influence had grown. Now, with Camilla stepping aside, her presence was no longer in the background. It was front and center. In palace halls, aides began referring to her differently. Not just Her Royal Highness, but our anchor. She wasn't just standing beside the king. She was holding up the monarchy's emotional core. And in doing so, she quietly reminded the world that compassion has power too. Because as one queen faded out, another quietly rose. Royal households restructured. The morning after the crown passed to William, everything inside Buckingham Palace felt different. The atmosphere had shifted. The corridors were busier, the energy sharper. Phones rang earlier, voices lowered as they spoke, and the scent of urgency filled the air. It wasn't panic, it was purpose. Royal aides, many of whom had served under multiple reigns, moved with a kind of silent coordination. Files were carried. Doors opened quickly. Briefings arrived not by the hour, but by the minute. The transition had begun. And it wasn't waiting for anyone. For months, some had quietly prepared for this moment. Still, few believed it would come so soon. The first signal of change came swiftly. Camilla's private office was dismantled. Staff were summoned. Teams that had worked closely with her for years were thanked and then released. Her senior advisors were offered dignified exits, early retirement, quiet reassignment, or voluntary withdrawal from public service. But the message was unmistakable. Camilla's era was officially over. Her public calendar, once filled with charity engagements, gallery visits, and overseas receptions, was cleared in a single day. No slow fade, no farewell tour, just an immediate and complete erasure of her official role. By mid-morning, the charities under her name were already in talks for reassignment. Some merged under broader royal umbrella programs. Others were handed directly to Catherine, now operating with new authority and quiet confidence. Insiders said Clarence House underwent an overnight transformation. The rooms once reserved for Camilla's planning meetings were cleared of her portraits, stationery, and personal decor. In their place, the crest of the House of Wales. Every file, every emblem, every small reminder of the old order was replaced with a new vision. And it didn't stop there. Public-facing departments were restructured. Media teams were reshuffled. Longtime communications leads were replaced with younger strategists loyal to William and Catherine's modern vision. Even uniforms were updated, subtle tweaks to color and cut, signaling a fresh tone. What began as an internal shakeup quickly evolved into a full-scale rebranding of the monarchy. William and Catherine now held the reins, not just symbolically but practically. Every meeting, every invitation, every decision was made through their oversight. The old hierarchy was quietly retired. And within just 24 hours, one truth became undeniable. A new royal rhythm had begun. Sharper, quieter, stronger, built not around tradition, but around the future. William's first decree as king. Later that week, in a moment the world had waited for, King William stepped forward and addressed the nation. He didn't wear a robe. There was no golden throne behind him, just the national flag, soft lighting, and a man finally stepping into his destiny. The speech wasn't long, but every word mattered. He looked directly into the camera, no script in hand, no teleprompter flicker in his eyes. And then he spoke the words that would echo for generations. A new era begins, with unity, with service, with love. The nation didn't breathe. The silence wasn't awkward, it was sacred. He began by honoring his father, not just for his reign, but for something more rare in royalty, knowing when to let go. He thanked King Charles for his wisdom, for his strength, and for stepping aside with grace. Then his gaze shifted, and with a softer tone, he acknowledged Camilla. "She stood by the king when few did," he said quietly. "That deserves our gratitude. No embellishment, no grand tribute, just truth. But what truly caught the hearts of millions wasn't the content. It was his tone. Calm, strong, and deeply human. This wasn't the voice of a distant monarch. This was a man grounded in family, shaped by grief, and driven by purpose. He didn't present himself as untouchable royalty. He spoke as a husband, a father, and a son. He didn't lean on tradition. He leaned into connection. He didn't list a string of political goals. There were no loud reforms or flashy promises. Instead, he made a single vow to serve the people not just as king, but as a listener. He spoke of unity in a divided world, of transparency in an age of skepticism, of compassion in a family still healing from wounds the public never fully saw. "I do not wear this crown alone," he said. "I carry it with you and for you." And as he spoke, even longtime critics paused. There was something different in the air, a new tone, a new temperature, a sense that, perhaps for the first time in decades, the crown didn't feel cold, it felt close. By the end of the speech, the message was unmistakable. This monarchy would no longer hide behind history. It would move forward with humanity, with humility, and with heart. And in that moment, the monarchy didn't just feel different, it felt reborn. Let me know if you'd like me to expand any other section or craft a custom video teaser or narration script from this one. A chapter closed, a legacy rewritten. Camilla entered royalty through whispers, controversy, and relentless headlines. But she exited in silence, without a scandal, without applause, and without the crown she once fought so hard to wear. Her story had always been complicated. Some called her a survivor, others called her a disruptor. But on her final day in the public eye, she was neither. She was simply a woman bowing out with dignity. Charles didn't fall. He stepped aside. And he did it with the kind of quiet courage that few had ever expected from him. He wasn't clinging to power. He was choosing legacy. His reign may not have lasted decades, but it ended on his own terms. And William, he didn't rise with a roar. He rose with resolve. The throne didn't harden him. It humbled him. And in that, the people saw not just a king, but a future they could believe in. As for Catherine, her presence said more than any title ever could. She didn't replace Camilla. She redefined what a queen could be, strong, steady, and loved. In the end, Camilla's stripped title wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was evolution. And in that evolution, the crown found new meaning. Camilla's crown is gone. Charles has stepped back. And William now leads the monarchy with heart. What felt impossible just months ago is now reality. A queen without a title, a king without a throne, and a future rewriting the past. Stay tuned, because the royal story is far from over.